This is episode 10 of the Untwisting the Truth podcast. It's been a while since I've done a podcast, and there have been so many things in my life where I've thought I really want to start doing this and I want to be consistent about it. And I'm consistent for a while, and then something happens, I get distracted or I get stressed about something else, and I just, you never know, 5-6 weeks have gone and I haven't produced any content. That's very typical of me, but I thought today I'd go back online and I would talk about things from a different perspective, because so far I've been discussing news, my analysis of news and events and the situation. Things at the moment in the UK have calmed down quite a bit. We've got relative freedoms. I mean, for the first time since March, you can walk into a pub, a normal pub without any limits on gatherings, or you walk up to the bar, no distancing involved. There's the option to do track and trace and sanitize your hands and all that, but it's not expected of you. So we're in a relatively good situation at this current stage, but the question is, of course, how long? But I'm going to talk more generally about the problem with authoritarianism and why I have a big problem with governments taking an authoritarian approach to matters. Because this whole situation, that the whole COVID regime over the last 18 months, it has caused me to look back on certain events and certain situations I found myself in my childhood and teenage years and early adulthood, and to evaluate the situations and understand why this situation or that situation was a problem for me, why I wasn't able to succeed in this environment, why I never really fit in. I certainly can see why, with so many friends that I've had over the years, why I just didn't fit in with the people around me, why in previous jobs I did not fit in, I couldn't make friends in that environment. And even in much more recent times, why the people that, I suppose were friends of mine more by circumstance than anything else, why I just never really fitted in, why I felt like the square peg in the round hole. And it has revealed an awful lot to me. So that is one good thing that has come out of it. I mean, sometimes there are times when I get extremely angry. There are times and I'm thinking, why does this have to happen? Why have the public allowed this COVID regime to operate, to continue? Why haven't the public done something to stop it? When I still think that we should have put a mass pushback on day one. And the very first day of lockdown, March 23rd, 2020. In fact, before that, the week before, the public should have said, what's going on here? Because that week was so depressing, because everything was just being gradually shut down. I mean, the pubs, they were still open, but people were encouraged not to go, and they were just kind of winding down their operations. And then they closed their doors on the Friday, and then the whole weekend you could still meet with people privately, but all the businesses were closed. And it was just a really down time. And it's unbelievable, really, because if it's safe to go to the pub and have a mass gathering there on the Friday, how come it's not safe on the Saturday? If it's a real emergency, you wouldn't be winding down operations within a week. You'd be saying, bang, it's an emergency, you've got to close everything down now, if it was truly an emergency. And what I really think should have happened is the people and the businesses should have just said, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to shut our business down. A lot of us have come to learn about this kind of stuff in the last year, but retrospectively, what we should have all done was written notices of conditional acceptance saying, well, we are happy to close our business down if you can prove that our business is a threat to public health and that people are going to die if we continue to remain open. But you need to provide that proof. That's what we should have all done. We should never have accepted this 3 weeks to flatten the curve, that the government's saying, well, we're going to take away your rights and your freedoms, but it's only for 3 weeks and then it's back. We should have said, no, we're not buying it. We know this trap. We can smell a rat here. We can see that we know history well enough to know that what starts out as a short-term crisis, as a temporary government initiative, does not end up becoming temporary. It goes on a lot longer than we initially told for, and we end up having to fight to get those freedoms back. So we are not going to allow you to set the precedent of lockdowns. That is how we should have responded, and I still think that. However, at the same time, in a way, there are good things that have happened as a byproduct of this terrible situation, of a byproduct of the frauds, the medical malpractice, the domestic terrorism, and all that. Because those of us who could see through what was going on, those of us who weren't buying the narrative, at the start we were a small minority back in March, April last year, but we bonded together. And I feel very sorry for those people who feel like me or have felt like me in the last 18 months and haven't managed to develop the connections and the social life that I have in this time. I'd urge anyone in that situation who is feeling alone to go to your nearest stand in the park on a Sunday. And there are people out there. Go on to some of the Facebook groups. There's a few out there for awakened people. Find out who else is in your area. Connect with them. I seriously encourage anyone who is still not connected with like-minded people, because this has become like the dividing point, really, in many ways. I don't want to live in a divided society. I really hope that, vaxxed or unvaxxed, whatever we've said about things in the past, that we can all come together and, we don't have to. I don't want a two-tier society. I hope we can all unite. Doesn't mean we're going to agree with each other or do the same things, but I really hope that we can all show each other some grace and forgive each other for the way we've acted in the last 18 months, because we've all acted in the wrong way in one way or the other. I really hope that can happen. But anyway, as I was saying, good things have come out of this, but nevertheless, the thing that gets to me is, as I say, at the same time as that, I am angry that this had to happen because it is so avoidable. I always get angry if I see there's a lot of pain and there's suffering involved in trying to solve a situation, and I can see that problem, that situation could have been resolved without the pain, the hardship and the suffering involved. I'm sure there are situations in my schooling where I saw that was the case, when I felt that way. Why does this teacher have to be such a disciplinarian when this other teacher, who's much nicer, much more easygoing, much more likable, gets the same results as the disciplinarian? Why can't they all be like the nice teacher? I often used to think that kind of way. And a bit about my background. I mean, I have always felt from a very young age like an underdog. When I was at play school, age 3, 4 years old, this was back in the 80s, I apparently had my routines. I would play on certain toys at certain times and never really made friends with people. When I started first school, I remember the first day of primary school very well. And it was a really really stressful day, going into this assembly with all these other kids and their parents and being taken into this class with a teacher I didn't know with probably 30 other kids, all age 4 and 5 that I didn't know. And the first year of primary school, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I kind of got by because the teacher was very easygoing, that you could play Lego models and all that sort of thing most of the time. He did a bit of work, but I still felt like a bit of an underdog because the other kids would maybe when the parents were around, before the morning bell went off, they'd talk about jokes. I remember one occasion when the kids were sharing jokes and I wasn't interested. I didn't get it. And for some reason, when the teacher would read the story at the end of the day, my mind went blank. I couldn't follow it. There was either some word that I didn't understand or my language or comprehension levels were not up to the standard of the others or the standard that was expected. And then the next year, which was year 2, when I was age 6 to 7, I had a teacher who judged every child, their overall intelligence, by how well they could read in terms of when the teacher asked you to bring your reading book to the table and you read out the words verbally of your book. It used to be those old 1, 2, 3 and away books, Roger Red Hat, Billy Blue Hat, Johnny Yellow Hat, to anyone who might remember that series. In fact, incidentally, I wrote my own version of that book, of a Roger Red Hat book, and I actually put it in with all the other books in the box at school when I was 5 years old. But obviously, when I got to about 6 and 7, I was reading these books to my teacher, and because I was relatively good at looking at a word and knowing how to pronounce it, that teacher always assumed that I would be intelligent every other way, and I'd be understand what I read. But I wasn't. I did have other. I wasn't capable in every other way. I had comprehension problems, and therefore I would end up getting told off. I would say on about 80% of days, I get told off because she thought I was lazy, that I didn't want to work, or because she judged me purely on my ability to read, as in, i.e., look at a word and know how to pronounce it. And she thought if you could do that, you could do this, that, the other. And that wasn't the case. So she had a kind of one-size-fits-all, very rigid approach to teaching. And obviously the days that I didn't get told off, it was probably because the work that I was set on those days or the tasks that I was given did not highlight my weaknesses. But there were certain days, particularly on a Wednesday, when the subject was RE. And basically what she would do is she would read a Bible story, and then I'd have the dreaded task, always had the dreaded task in my view, of having to write it down your own words. And I couldn't do that because my comprehension levels were not up to the standard that she expected. I couldn't listen to the story because for some reason, my ability to comprehend, my understanding of vocabulary of language is not up to the standard that she expected. So I went blank. My mind went blank. I copied the bit that she'd write on the blackboard, and then she put a few words of spelling. And one day she went up to me and said, "What do you mean, duck, dove?" Because duck was a word that she put up on the blackboard for spelling. Dove was another word. So I had no idea. So I just wrote duck, dove because I had no idea what to do. And I got told off every Wednesday, but I just had, I did know better. And again, that's one, time in my life, in my early childhood, that has probably impacted me my whole life. And there have been no doubt other situations where in my schooling, maybe in my secondary schooling, when you come across teachers, and I did have extra help with various things, but you'd come across teachers who were very rigid in how they taught. They were very one size fits all. They would have a blanket expectation for everybody. And I could see a problem with that because there were people out there who were disadvantaged by that and served nothing They didn't benefit in any way by a teacher's one-size-fits-all blanket approach that everybody must meet this standard, everyone must learn this way, because it didn't take into account for individual needs. And fast forward to 2020, that is the big problem I have with the government, and that is the one that's made me so angry, that even if there was a genuine health crisis and a real virus, which there isn't, or at least no one has identified yet, but even if there was, this blanket, you must all stay home, regardless of your age, regardless of who you know, there's all kinds of people who are put at a disadvantage, who lose out for no good reason because of that. Myself, for instance, I'm in my 30s. I'm healthy. I've had nothing in my life, no health scares ever. The only thing I get is the common cold, which incidentally I haven't actually had since COVID. And I've had to have a few dental fillings and that. Other than that, I've never had a health scare, never broken a bone, never been to A&E or anything like that in my life. And I also don't have any elderly relatives. My parents and all my uncles and aunties are in their 60s. I haven't got anyone relate to me who's over 70. So this idea that you need to even though you're healthy, you must stay at home to protect the elderly vulnerable. Well, I don't know any vulnerable people, so why does it matter? But this is the problem with a blanket instruction, a blanket mandate. It doesn't take into account individual needs that are not being met, needs that are in jeopardy, needs that are overlooked. Because let's face it, those government ministers who are doing these, who have been mandating it, Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, Chris Whitty, he's not a government minister, but you know what I mean. They've all got nice big houses and gardens. They've got probably, well, I don't know if they're good, but they're all married. They don't consider what it's like to be a single person, a single man, living on your own, a single individual whose social life is orientated around going out, going to social events, going to the pub in the week, going to whatever hobbies or interests, because you don't have anyone to talk to at home. If you're married, maybe it's not quite such a big deal, although there's other challenges there. If your relationship gets strained because you're with each other all the time. If you're a young family, you think, well, it might be quite nice to get a bit of time with the kids. But the thing is that when they give a blanket, you must stay home, and take this authoritarian approach, the problem is that they neglect certain individuals whose needs are not being met. I do not just mean the need to live, like the need for food, but the social needs, the needs for overall well-being and for happiness are not being met because of these blanket mandates. And the reason why I think this way is very much because of my experiences where I have been the one who has been disadvantaged because of inflexible, blanket, rigid mandates and expectations. And one thing that I have been thinking about quite a bit in the last 18 months is the whole nature of the schooling system. The fact that the schooling system teaches you all kinds of stuff that you don't need to know, that is pretty useless, and doesn't teach you a lot of stuff that really is essential. And it seems like the schooling system seems to want everybody to be a certain type of character, broad and balanced individuals. That's why even when you do your GCSEs, when you reach age 14, 15, you are having to take a broad range of subjects. You still have to take English, maths and science. And I don't know exactly the same now, but when I did it, you'd still have to take either a humanity subject like geography, history, or general humanities or RE. You'd have to take an art such as music, art, design, technology. You'd also have to take a more language, French or German. So you still have to take a broad range of subjects. And the schooling system, it neglects those who are not by nature broad and balanced. I, by nature, am not a broad and balanced person. There are many things that one might, people who know me think I'm quite intelligent, and I speak quite intelligently because when I was growing up, I didn't really mix in with my peer groups very much. I spent more time with adults than I did with children. So I picked up lots of adult language. And as a result, I think I've developed a good vocabulary. In fact, in my GCSE English, I got an A star, apparently, for the speaking and listening element. I got an A for the English language in general, but apparently the speaking and listening element was A star. But as a result of that, I will say that I feel that I sound and present a more intelligent and capable persona than I actually am in practice. I remember watching this TV program back in about 2004, 2005 time, Rock School, where Gene Simmons, the frontman of Kiss, the rock band, he went into Christ's Hospital in Horsham and tried to create a rock band of this very conservative school. And he said in that, at the start of that documentary, well, people might look at me with dressed in my makeup on and think, well, he's not very well read. And actually, I am well read. And I feel I'm the opposite. People might look at me and think he's very smart, he's very intelligent, he's very capable. But actually, the problem I have is I'm not that good, in my opinion, of taking generic information and applying that to specific and different situations. So people, I think, and it could be my opinion, that I think I sound brighter and more intelligent than I actually am, because I would be good at picking up big words because I spoke to adults more than to children in my younger years, but I wasn't very good at applying the information that I learnt. Where was I going here? But yeah, as I was saying, the school system seems to want everyone to kind of fit into a certain mold and to end up being a good employee. Well, I remember there were obviously some things that I had a big problem with. For instance, what was the point of someone like myself learning rugby when you did PE? Because you would look at someone like myself and think there's no way I'd be a rugby player. I'd absolutely none of the attributes for it. I'm the wrong size physically. I don't have the physique for it. And also, I don't have the team working skills that would be needed. So I'm the absolute opposite. But then I'd be expected to do rugby for a certain amount of my PE lessons. Why? And you could say that for many other things. And I remember, having special needs, I managed to sort of get out of some of this stuff quite early on and find a way out of this. In a way, I guess I was fortunate, but I did. I had a deputy head teacher who was the deputy head of the special needs unit at the school I was at. And if I was things I was worried about, because there were situations that did worry me, she would write a message saying, Christopher doesn't have to do this, that, the other. And I used that, and that was quite powerful in a way. But the thing is that I remember on a parents' evening, I wasn't there, but when my mum and dad went round to see the teachers and all that about how I was doing, apparently my mum came back home and said, well, this teacher agreed it would be nice that when you get a bit older, you won't have to do this, that, the other. Well, the teachers are agreeing that it's not necessary for me to learn this. So why are you bothering teaching me now? And again, it's this blanket one size fits all. Everyone has to fit a certain mold. The other thing, and I wasn't a rebel at school. I worked very hard. I tried to be conscientious of everything because I thought to myself, well, there must be a reason. When I was 11, 12, 13 years old, I thought, well, there must be a reason why I'm having to learn this, that, the other. There must be something useful. And maybe I'm just too young to understand it. But then I got to me later in years, I realized there isn't actually any good reason. And I got quite angry about certain policies and procedures that took place in the school. I think when I was about 15, 16, I thought, why does this happen this way? Why? And I got particularly angry when I saw there were being rules put in place that no one benefited from. Because, for instance, why do you call the teachers by Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so? And you'd see the teachers calling each other by first name terms. And I found that very insulting, because it's like saying, well, you're not good enough. You're too low, sort of thing. But why? What's the point of that? Why can't you call everyone by their first name? Who benefits from the rules? And this is what a question that I asked when I was about 15, 16. It occurred to me that certain rules were in place not to benefit anybody, but to boost the egos of those in authority, to give them more power and more control, and to try and highlight someone else's superiority. And that gets to me big time. And that is why the mask mandates, for instance, have really got to me. Because being told to wearing a mask when you know full well it is not saving anybody's life, it is not protecting anybody, is insulting. It's an insult. And the whole of the COVID regime is an insult. If it was based on sound science and the governments of the world gave us the very clear and unequivocal scientific proof that these measures, the restrictions are absolutely necessary, they are genuinely about saving lives, and if we don't have them, there's going to be backlash of consequences, then I would not have a problem. But they have not. They've just said the science is this, the science is that, and they're telling us like lemmings to believe it. And I feel insulted by that. And this is, again, a problem with authoritarianism. It makes people feel this big. And I'm not happy about it. And I remember when I spoke to various other adults, not the teachers or my parents necessarily, but other adults that I knew outside of school, and asked them questions about, well, why is this a rule? Why is that a rule? I never got a very clear answer. I didn't get a definitive answer saying that if we didn't have this, we'd have this problem. But it was more like, it was all vague. Well, it's just to try and, it was like the idea was there was no answer. That's why I can't give an answer. There was no clear answer. It's just so that, the teacher gets a bit more, just so they can have more control over the class. Because I can understand certain rules I can understand. I could understand rules against bullying, against causing disruption. If you were speaking in the class and you were preventing someone else from learning, I had no problem with that. Because I could see that if you broke that rule, you were being harmed. Someone else was being harmed. Someone else was being adversely affected. I had no issue with that. But I had an issue, like when things like uniform, and particularly when someone says you've got to tuck your shirt in or wear your uniform a certain way. Why? Who benefits from that? Who is the victim if you don't follow that rule? No one can give me a definitive answer. The only answers I get is to help discipline. It's to try and create a more orderly environment. It's almost like saying, well, we have to have these things in place so that we don't get this problem occurring, even though there's no actual direct link, right? This is what gets to me, because all these rules that are there in place that don't serve any purpose except to give more power to the people at the top, they don't actually prevent any kind of crime or disorder or potential incidents that you can prove. They just are a burden and a stifle on the freedoms and the expression of the individuals. It makes me angry. It's unnecessary because society can function without it. One other thing that I think I mentioned in the previous podcast that really made me angry was the idea of conscription, compulsory national service. And especially after watching a documentary about it back in 1997 and having so many people saying we should bring it back. Well, no, because we know that you might argue that it might turn the boys into men, that it might install some discipline, that it might potentially create a more orderly society, it might have a benefit to society as a whole. You can't prove that. And for once, society can function without it. So if it is not necessary for a society to function, then it shouldn't happen because no one is benefiting from it. I would be told to be doing something that there's no reason for me to be told to do that because no one is going to be hurt, no one is going to be harmed if I don't do it. So why? This is and I think I've summed up fairly well in this podcast, my personal reasons why I've been so angry this year at many times, why I'm angry at this government and why I want to see this change. I want to see us have a libertarian government, a government that will only legislate where it's necessary to do so to prevent harm, loss or injury. A government that recognises that blanket laws, blanket mandates will put certain people at a disadvantage because everybody's needs are different. They say, well, food is essential, but your social life, nah, not essential. Well, it's essential to me, all right, because I won't be happy without it. And it's incredible that many of the thoughts that I had over 20 years ago now, and fast forward to today, I actually realised I was right about a lot of things. A lot of things where the things that I thought and that I suggested were just dismissed out of hand. I feel I've proven to be right, and I've had many people validate the things I say. I've learned about the concept of common law, which is that you cause no harm, loss, or injury, but aside from that, you're free to go about your business as you choose, and that being the foundation of our Constitution. Anyway, I'm going to round this off there. I hope this has been an interesting podcast. It's a little bit different. There's no news. There's no analysis. Just my personal background and my personal thoughts on why I have come to be really angry about this situation and why I've opposed this from day one. Thank you for listening, and I'll speak again soon.